Hello, I'm Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, President and Senior Lecturer of Repairs of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Joined tonight by my co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, and also the co-chairs and tri-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival in Kentucky. And we're here tonight for another United States Senate Town Hall. I want to thank all of you for coming on. You don't see my face tonight because I'm in the car driving. We're just leaving Washington, D.C., where more than 100 clergy of every different creed, representing thousands and thousands of people across the nation, took the streets in D.C. in front of the Supreme Court, the Capitol, and marched in the street over to the Senate building and declared that the Senate in its current structure and its current reality is committing sin against God and sin against our Constitution in the way in which it is stifling votes on stimulus, but then pushing votes on Supreme Court justices even before one of them has been laid to rest, and other things that are going on. So I'm in the car coming from that. It reminded us today how important the Senate body is and how important it is for whoever's running, regardless of their party, for us to know where they stand on the issues as it relates to poverty and low wealth, systemic racism, ecological devastation, the war economy, and this false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We know across this country that poor and low wealth people now represent nearly a third of the electorate. Over 64 million poor and low wealth people are eligible to vote. We know that 34 million last time didn't, 29 million did. And when we posed through a deeply empirical study with the professor at Columbia University why is this the case, three answers came up. One, they never hear politicians talk about poverty and low wealth. They hear them either racialize poverty or talk about the middle class, but never speak directly to poor and low wealth people in both word and policy. Number two, transportation and the inability to get a day off. And number three, voter suppression. We recognize that these things all can be changed. We know in this country there are 140 million poor and low wealth people before COVID. 43% of the nation are poor and low wealth. 66 million of our white Caucasian brothers and sisters are poor and low wealth. 26 million African Americans are poor and low wealth. And that represents in percentage 61% of all African Americans and 30% of all Caucasian brothers and sisters. So in the percentages, it's one thing, and raw numbers is another. And that's not even including our Latino brothers and sisters, Indigenous brothers and sisters, Asian brothers and sisters. And we know before COVID, we had 87 million people either underinsured or uninsured. And now after COVID, we know that 40% of the jobs making under $40,000 a year gone. We know 27 million more people have been added to the uninsured rolls. We know that we passed bills and the majority of the money, supermajority, has gone to corporations and not the people. We know that poverty will be well over 50% of this nation. And over 50% of our children live in poverty. And in Kentucky, when you look at the stats on poverty, and I hope that Reverend Liz or Reverend Rob tonight, those stats. And the question becomes, how can any person who is serious about Kentuckians not address the issue of poverty and low wealth? How can anyone walk past it? How can anybody not call it by name? How can anybody not address it? When in fact, from the hood to the hollows, our brothers and sisters in the human race in Kentucky deal with poverty, lack of living wage jobs, and other things because of bad policy. That can in fact be changed. We know now that in 15 states in this nation, poor and low wealth people vote anywhere between 1% and 19% more than they did last year in 2016, that those states, the poor and low wealth vote can change who sits in the United States Senate. governor's office and the presidency. We know that as an empirical fact. We know it's a fact, even in Kentucky, the number of poor and low wealth people that did not vote, if they were to turn out black and white and brown, Latino, and indigenous, they could fundamentally shift the electorate. But the question is, will those who are running for office speak to them? And specific about it now, as we watch stimulus bills being held up in the United States Senate, we watch Supreme Court lifetime decisions being made without any respect for decorum and decency. When we know that rights bills have been held up in the floor of the Senate, living wage bills have been held up in the floor of the Senate, we recognize that the Senate is indeed powerful and cannot be ignored if we are serious about a transformation and a national moral revival that focuses on the issues of poor and low wealth people. You cannot ignore the United States Senate. And so tonight, we are glad to have Ms. McGrath, who's running for the United States Senate. We want all the media to know we invited both candidates. We invited them often. We invited them certified. We only received word from Senator McGrath that she would come to talk to people on this call who are black, who are white, who are from the mountains and from the street corners, who are from the rural areas of Kentucky and then the town and the city areas of Kentucky. On this call tonight are Kentuckians. And we are thankful that she would not ignore or turn away what would come on this call. We're getting ready to go to a video for you to be reminded of the movement and what we stand for. And after that, Reverend Rob will give some remarks. And then Reverend Dr. Liz, our co-chair, who will be doing the primary handling from here, will give remarks, bring on our two of our tri-chairs in the person of Pam Michaels-Zantana. And then Reverend Liz will come back and she will introduce, Ms. McGrath, who will have a 5-minute opening statement to say why it is and what it is, her vision for running for the United States Senate. 100 people, that's all, the most powerful body of 100 literally in the world, and so critical to the times in which we live now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much for being a movement. Remember, forward together, not one step back. At the bottom of the screen, we have all the ways you can be involved in our We Must Do More, Voting is Power Unleashed. All of it is right there because we don't just talk to be talking. All of our talking leads to organizing. All of our organizing leads to mobilizing. All of our mobilizing leads to changing the narrative. And all of our changing the narrative leads to building power. And when we have power, we unleash it because we know that a change can and must come in this nation. God bless you. Thank you, Ms. McGrath, for coming on. Everybody now turn to the video.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am a working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
We were in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying.
I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's. I had lost my house. You're welcome to come inside. There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff. They be asking me for it, I can't give it to them.
Now I'm a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide. Why? They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs.
I see poverty in my own community. You know, there's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the street, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice, lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17.
My only chance of going to college was joining the Army. We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps.
This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care, and they canceled my health insurance, and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease, and I'm in the 5th stage. Murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence, and I lost a daughter.
No parent in America should have to bury their child for lack of medicated space.
I'm wailing because my children
my God.
are no more.
My God, Kelly.
I'm wailing, y'all. Wailing. Because my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children?
No more.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign Senate Forum Town Hall. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. If you would just take a moment and share this video out to all your friends on your social media, send a text, get some folks on for this important conversation. We know from the video we just saw and from recent events in Kentucky that we live in a nation that has yet to learn how to mourn, and to mourn the unnecessary deaths, certainly of Breonna Taylor, but of so many that we saw in that video and that our co-chairs see across the country all the time. At this time, I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who is our co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival. Reverend Liz.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. As Rob said, I'm the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. I'm also the director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice. And I bring greetings from all of our Poor People's Campaign coordinating committees across the country. We're getting ready to start this town hall. And without further ado, I want to introduce 2 of our tri-chairs from Kentucky. We're going to hear greetings from Pam McMichael and Tana Fogel, with Pam McMichael welcoming us first. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend Liz, and good evening, everyone. I'm joining this call from Louisville, Kentucky, a community in mourning and in action from the killing of Breonna Taylor. We thank you for joining us this evening from Kentucky and across the country. And we thank you, Ms. McGrath, for joining the Senate Town Hall tonight. We welcome you to it. This is a very important occasion to have this Senate Town Hall hosted by the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign. Poor and low-income people are one of the largest segments of the electorate, and poor and low-income issues are rarely addressed In Kentucky alone, nearly 700,000 poor and low-income people did not vote in the 2016 elections. So again, thanks to all on behalf of the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we look forward to hearing Ms. McGrath to your words and joining us in ensuring that poor people's issues aren't left out in this election. And now I want to pass it to my dear friend and one of the tri-chairs of the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign, Tana Fogel.
Thanks, Pam. And my sentiments are the same. Coming from Lexington, Kentucky, proud to have my pastor, Michael Robinson, who will be joining us a little bit later. I am an impacted person. I'm also a University of Kentucky graduate and a former University of Kentucky Lady Cat. I am working with the Kentucky Democracy Project. We have worked tirelessly 24 hours a day, it seems, as we rotate to make sure that folks in Kentucky are registered to vote. Those who have fallen underneath of the governor's executive order, we have worked really hard to make sure that they are eligible to vote. And that is one of the lifts that I want to make clear. We have come forward. We will not step back. The injustices around mass incarceration to ensure that folks with felonies in their past do not exercise their right to vote in the democratic process is a tragedy. I know that we are nonpartisan, but the politics in Kentucky must stop. And we hope that we have found a newfound freedom. Thank you, Ms. McGrath, for accepting our invitation. And I'm going to stop right there before I get in trouble. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Rob. Thank you all for joining in tonight. If you have not registered, please contact us. We will get you registered.
Well, thank you so much, Pam, and thank you, Tana. And now we do appreciate that Amy McGrath has taken the time out of her schedule. We, as Reverend Barber said, sent certified letters, contacted campaigns of both McConnell and McGrath multiple times, and thank you so much for being here. You have 5 minutes with an opening statement to tell us some of the 140 million poor and low-income people in this country, where you stand on the issues and demands that impact us so greatly.
Okay, well, first of all, and I know we're going to have a lot of questions, so hopefully we'll be able to delve into a lot more than just 5 minutes. But I want to start out by thanking you all. You know, Reverend Theo Harris, Dr. Barber, Reverend Barber, Tanya, Pam, I'm looking around the screen here. I want to thank you for all the work that you do for our country, for your fellow American, for your fellow Kentuckian. I think we're all trying to do our part right now, and many of us are, and we all have different roles to play. And I just wanted to personally thank you because your role is really important. When people ask me, you know, Amy, why did you do this? Why are you running for U.S. Senate? Why are you going against, you know, arguably the most powerful man in the Senate? You know, first of all, my whole adult life has been about service to others. It was done in a way that I wanted to do, and that was serving in the military. But it has been about service, and it has been about our country. And when I want to go to the U.S. Senate, I think about service to country again and service to people. What does our country need right now? We need leaders, and we need people who are going to take care of their fellow citizen and do what's right for the common good. So when I launched this campaign, I launched it on a single issue of healthcare because we had so many Kentuckians that couldn't afford healthcare. We had so many Kentuckians that were paying too much for prescription drug prices. And beyond that, what we're dealing with right now with coronavirus has certainly exposed all of the major inequities that you all have known about and have been working against for a long time. but it has exposed major problems and inequities in healthcare between poor people, low-income people, and everyone else. Racial inequities in education, in wealth, in healthcare, in the criminal justice system that we absolutely have to tackle in this country. When people tell me, hey, Amy, we're in the middle of this coronavirus and I just want to get back to normal. You know what I tell them? Normal is what got us to 205,000 Americans dead of coronavirus in 7 months. Normal is what got us here in Kentucky to 1 million Kentuckians filed for unemployment in the last 3 or 4 months. Normal is what got us to 300,000 Kentuckians still without health care. 40% of Kentuckians who are renters at risk of being thrown out of their house right now, of their condo, of their apartment right now. Normal is what got us to 25 million Americans demonstrating in the streets for racial justice, for Black Lives Matter. Normal is what got us to, the tragic death here in Kentucky of Breonna Taylor. We can't go back to that. We have to commit ourselves to being better. That's what this coronavirus, that's what everything we've been seeing in the last few months has got to show leaders. And what I'm committed to doing in the Senate is to try to help to make things better. Better for poor people, better for working individuals. And I'll tell you who is not committed to doing that is my opponent, okay? And that's Mitch McConnell. And the reason is because he has built a dysfunctional system. Reverend Barber talked about it so eloquently at the very beginning, about how the US Senate, composed of 100 Americans who are supposed to be just like you and me, who are supposed to care about the common good. And these 100 Americans have enormous amount of power. And he has created that Senate, that what was once the most deliberative body in the planet to solve problems in the greatest country on the planet. He has made it dysfunctional, partisan, polarized. And it's leaving, his system is leaving Americans, particularly poor and working Kentuckians, further and further behind. And we're seeing it now with coronavirus every single day. So I want to get to the Senate and put people first. And I really look forward to talking to you about some of the policies that we can enact with the US Senate, in the US Senate, if Mitch McConnell's gone and if I can get in there.
Thank you so much, Amy McGrath, for those opening remarks. And we are indeed very interested in talking about the policy solutions that are at hand to really address these problems. Read a couple of statistics about the crisis that you're talking about that's going on in Kentucky. Before the pandemic hit, 37% or 1.6 million people in Kentucky were poor or low income. That was 50% of children, 44% of women, 56% of Black people, 67% of Latinx people, and 40% of white people. And as you were saying in your opening remarks, the healthcare crisis was indeed a crisis before this public healthcare nightmare. And that this pandemic has significantly worsened health and economic conditions for poor and low-income Kentuckians. Just want to say a couple more things, which is that 43.7% of Kentucky's population, more than 1 million people, 1,460,000 people have lost income because of this crisis. And 52% of Kentucky poor and low-income households have experienced a loss of employment altogether. This means that people don't have food to eat. This means that people are reporting symptoms of depression. And this crisis doesn't have to be this way. And so, this evening we're here to hear some stories and have some questions from impacted Kentuckians and from us in the Poor People's Campaign to be able to talk about some of the policy solutions and policy platforms that are possible to put forward in this moment. So again, what I want to do now is bring it over to Tiffany Payette, who will first introduce herself, tell us a little bit about the life and story that she has, and then pose our first question. And Ms. McGrath, you'll have then 4 minutes to respond after she introduces herself.
Thank you, Reverend Liz. My name is Tiffany Payette. I live in Eastern Kentucky. I'm Indigenous and I live on my tribe's traditional territory lands, but I pay rent that I can barely afford in order to be here, and my tribe doesn't live here. I am disabled with a life-threatening rare disease called common variable immunodeficiency. I'm on Medicaid, so my survival depends on the decision-making of those we elect into government. Healthcare is deeply important to me for obvious reasons. My assertion that I'm worthy of life is sometimes controversial to folks because of the policies that are made and the way that we talk about them. But I know that I am no less valuable to the world or to our state because I'm sick. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to ask this important question. In Kentucky, in addition to the 1.6 million poor and low-income people, there are 406,500 people who lack health insurance, and 871,000 make less than $15 per hour. How is your campaign specifically going to address these issues of poverty, inequality, healthcare, and living wages? And how will you challenge the myth of scarcity that claims there's not enough for everyone to thrive in our state? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Tiffany. You know, healthcare, as I mentioned earlier, is the single most important issue that I launched this campaign on. And I think the first thing we need to do is shore up the Affordable Care Act. Because, you know, you talked about being on Medicaid. You know, we expanded Medicaid here in Kentucky. That helped a lot of Kentuckians. My opponent, of course, wants to take all that back. He wants to throw people off of healthcare. 250,000 Americans would be thrown off of healthcare if we got rid of the Affordable Care Act. So that's not what I want to do. I want to fix the Affordable Care Act. I want to do things like a public option. And what is that? That's the idea that you could get a nonprofit government plan. You could buy it. And you know what? In the middle of a pandemic, if you're thrown off your job and you can't afford it, it can be subsidized by Uncle Sam during this time of need right now. We shore up Medicaid, we shore up Medicare, we fix the Affordable Care Act. These are things we can do, and work on getting prescription drug prices down. And I know that we can do that because it's bipartisan. 90% of Americans want to get prescription drug prices down. Even our current president has talked about it. And there are 6 bipartisan bills that passed the House that are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk, one of 400. 6 of 400 that are sitting on his desk. So that's what I would do just for healthcare. Now, inequality, how do we tackle that? I'm for policies like universal pre-K, a broadband New Deal. Why? Because we got to invest in ourselves. We got to tackle inequality with more investment in education. There's a $23 billion education gap between majority white schools and majority non-white schools in this country. It's not fair. It's not right. So we can do things like closing that gap. How do we tackle poverty? Raise the minimum wage. I'm for $15 an hour, but let's debate about what it should be. I think we can't debate right now because Mitch McConnell won't allow debate on these things. I think we need to do it. I think we should also protect workers' rights to unionize. I think that really helps keep people out of poverty. And none of these things can happen unless we tackle corruption in Washington. So I have a plan to do that as well. But to address the scarcity myth, this is so important. Because how is it in Kentucky, where we have some of the poorest counties in the country, and we've had them for the last few decades, yet we have one of the richest senators in the country? How does that happen? Because he's built a system where the rich and powerful get more powerful. That's what he's all about, okay? We've got to go back. He has enough power and influence to give tax cuts to the wealthiest 1%, trillions of dollars a couple of years ago. We should be able to help people out with extended unemployment. We should be able to help people out with investment in education, in the infrastructure needs that we have here in Kentucky. That's what I want to do. And that's how I think we can really lift everybody up. Things like universal pre-K, things like broadband New Deal. Invest in ourselves again, and not just the wealthiest 1%, not just corporations. I still got 24 seconds, but I'm going to hand it back.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the seriousness with which you're taking all of those questions and the issues that we're raising. As we said in our opening, poor and low-income people really hold a power that in some cases is still not leashed, still not unleashed. But what we know is that in Kentucky, in 2016, in that presidential election, there were 680,000 poor and low-income eligible voters who did not vote. But when those voters hear the names, hear the conditions that folks are experiencing, we know that people will be inspired to vote. So the next question comes from me. The current U.S. Senate has refused to restore the protections of the Voting Rights Act. Voter suppression is on the rise across the country. And while it is targeted at Black and Brown communities, it hurts poor white and other communities and undermines our democracy. Our question is, how are you addressing voter suppression? What are your policy commitments to ending voter suppression if you're elected?
It's a fantastic question. And let me just start out by saying this. When I wore the uniform for 24 years in the military, I fought for every single American's right to vote. It's not a privilege, it's a right. And that means we have to make sure that people can vote, okay? After I ran last cycle in Kentucky 6, I really saw how voter suppression is real. We lost by a couple points. I drove into a McDonald's drive-through a couple of weeks later. I talked to a young woman who was working behind in the drive-through, getting a cup of coffee, and she said, "Oh, I loved your campaign. I loved your commercials." I said, "Great. Did you vote?" She said, "No." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, I couldn't get off work. I dropped my kid off in the morning at my mom's house, and I come here. This is my job. And I couldn't meet that 12-hour window." That's voter suppression. There's a lot of people like that. We have to work to make voting a right that everybody can have. And I'm committed to that. So let me just tell you what I'm doing in the campaign and what I commit to when elected. In the campaign, which I've been doing for a year, my approach has always been to try to help people vote with as much the ways that I can do that. Voter education. I've invested a lot of resources in my campaign just to help people vote. In the primary, I brought a lawsuit to the state to force them to open more polling sites in the middle of coronavirus so that people could vote. I put a lot of resources into voter education. Right now, we've had over 1.5 million texts. So sorry about that. If you live in Kentucky, you're getting a text from me as to how to vote. Voter registration drives for former felons and for college students right now. Voter protection. We have 400 volunteers around the state that are working on voter protection right now for this campaign. I have a website called KentuckyVotes.com that gives people a drop-down menu for every single county in Kentucky and tells them how they can vote, where they can go. We have a 1-800 number, a hotline, where if you're having trouble getting your ballot right now, you can call. These are all ways that I'm working in the campaign. But let me tell you when elected what I'll do. You ever heard of H.R. 1? It was a good piece of legislation. We need it. And in the Senate, of course, it was stalled because Mitch McConnell wouldn't allow even a debate on it. But what it would do would be providing voting a holiday so that people could get off of work. It would allow same-day registration. It would tackle gerrymandering. I would be passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act yesterday if I were in the Senate, okay? I would also be protecting our elections, protecting them not only from foreign interference, but also giving our elections, our postal service, the resources to make sure we can have mail-in balloting during a pandemic. And by all means, every chance I get in the Senate, I'm going to try to expand the people's ability to vote. Here's the thing, folks. We're not living in 1950. This 12-hour window where you can vote, it disenfranchises a lot of people. We can do so much better. And the good news here in Kentucky right now is that you can vote by mail, no excuse, immediately. You can go on govoteky.com, get your ballot. It takes like 30 seconds on your phone if you got a phone to be able to do that. And then we have 3 weeks of early voting from October 13th all the way until November 2nd. So I'm trying to say that every chance I can. And in the Senate, I want to make sure that we can expand voting rights. That's so important, to include a national law that would give back voting rights to former felons of nonviolent offenses. Look, here in Kentucky, and I know I'm going over just a few more seconds, we're at the mercy of a governor for that. And we have a good governor right now who's given those rights back. But what happens when the next governor comes in and takes them away again? It's a right. It's a right. So I want to go to the Senate and make sure that we don't have to fight that battle every single time we have a new governor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your answer and for informing the people, the thousands of people that are joining us right now, about ways to vote early, and make sure that your voice is heard. The next question is also mine, again, and we've talked a little bit about it this evening already. This coronavirus, this pandemic, that in the words of some of our public health advisors, has exposed the fissures of society, racism, poverty, inequality. And so the question here is, if elected, what would your immediate focus be in responding to the needs of essential workers, who are often poor and low-income workers, and other poor communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic? What we know is that the biggest contributor to who's impacted is if you're poor or low income. What we know is that communities of color, Black communities, brown communities, have been just ravaged by this pandemic, and then by the pandemics of increased racism and poverty. And so the question is what's your policy response to all of that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The coronavirus has just exposed so much inequality. It's so devastating. Black Americans, Black Kentuckians are dying at 2.5 times the rate of white Americans from coronavirus. And so your question is, what would I do? And a lot of people have asked me along the campaign trail, what's the first piece of legislation that you get that throughout the campaign for a year. But now with coronavirus, I think it's really clear. We need immediate aid. We had aid initially that was a start back in March. And we have a senator, unfortunately, that literally just kind of stopped working on it. And a lot of those benefits ended. They ended. And we knew this aid was going to end. And it's really hurting people right now. So that's the first thing I would do. Immediate aid to Kentucky families, to workers, to real people. I'd also force. I'd be jumping up and down every single day in the Senate, forcing an administration, no matter what administration it is, red or blue, don't care. But you've got to have a national plan for testing and tracing, because we can't get this economy back. We can't get people, we can't help people until we tackle this coronavirus. We're losing 800 to 1,000 Americans a day. Think about that. At the height of World War II, we were losing 250 Americans a day. We're losing 800 to 1,000. And we still don't have a plan to tackle this virus. So we've got to have that. We've got to have PPE. We're all headed into the fall right now, when we're going to be starting to go back indoors. We've got flu season coming up. We have got to make sure we have the stockpiles of PPE ready to go. We've got to have people who are first responders and people who are out there every day working. We're calling them essential workers, hazard pay. You're forcing them to go back to work in these impossible situations when we're not even giving them their protective equipment to do so. And they should be getting hazard pay. You know, these are things that I want to do. And then by all means, let's help Kentucky families. Let's extend the unemployment insurance right now. We can do this. If you can bail out billions of dollars, $500 billion to big corporations in a slush fund, you can give working people and families $600 a week to make ends meet. All right, if they're thrown off their job. Let's make sure we have a subsidized public option, like I talked to you about. If you're thrown off your health care, you're on the public option and it's subsidized by Uncle Sam so that nobody can go without health care during a pandemic. And then we got to have rent subsidies. Make sure that we have an eviction moratorium. We can increase SNAP benefits. We still have 1 in 5 Kentucky kids that are hungry right now. We can do better. You know, we have to do better. And the other thing I would focus on is more aid for state and local governments. What is that? That's just jobs, folks. That's essential workers. That's essential services. That's our school systems. Those are our firefighters. And we've got to have, you know, if we want to have our kids go back to school safely, we also have to provide them the tools to succeed. And that means technology and broadband and those types of things. So those are all things I want to work on. But we've got to have immediate aid. And I can go on, but I only have 30 seconds. So I'll pass it back and we'll go to the next question.
Well, thank you so much. And again, I just want to point out and appreciate that you're talking policy. You're talking, you know, solutions. You're talking the way that we can as a people respond and elected officials. So the final question or set of questions we have are going to come from Pastor Michael Robinson. He will introduce himself first and then ask the question. If you can answer the question and also include some final remarks as you respond. So Pastor Robinson, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Again, my name is Michael Robinson. I'm a pastor here in Lexington, Kentucky, as well as a small business owner. My family and I own Not Your Ordinary Vegan Cafe here in Lexington. My question is, I think it's simple, but very important. And the question is how would you define systemic racism and what policies are in your platform to address them?
So Amy's definition of systemic racism, it's maybe not the book definition, but this is the way I think. It's the idea that you have a system that is designed in which the color of your skin, you are already disadvantaged from the get-go. That's what I think of systemic racism. And I think about it in terms of wealth, education. So education, as I mentioned earlier, the $20 billion gap between majority white schools and majority non-white schools. That's systemic racism right there. That's the idea that just by the color of your skin, you have there's a different standard. There's a different system for you. There's, criminal justice system. We've been talking a lot about that lately. And the fact that there can't be two different systems of justice, but it's real. That's what I think about when I think about systemic racism. The fact that 2.5 times as many Black Kentuckians are dying of coronavirus than white Kentuckians. The fact that Black mothers have a much higher infant mortality rate and mortality rate. That's systemic racism, okay, to me. And we've got to continue to tackle that. That's what social justice is all about, okay? So how am I going to do that? All right, well, I've come up with, and it wasn't just me coming up with this, it was leaders from around Kentucky helping me do this, come up with an equality for all, racial justice plan. Because I've got to have a plan, you got to know where I stand. And if you want the details of this, I would ask you to go to my website, amymcgrath.com, because it's on there. and it's a lot of stuff. But let me give you some highlights of that. Criminal justice reform, passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I mean, Mitch McConnell won't even allow it to be debated on the Senate floor. Come on, this is reasonable stuff here. To make sure we have body cameras for police officers, to make sure there's a national database for police officers. I mean, I served in the military. You don't get kicked out of the Army and then get to roll into the Navy. We know we should have a database. This is common sense stuff. End cash bail, because what you're doing is you're it's a different system. You're allowing people that are poor, you're hurting them more. Okay, that's a starting place just for the criminal justice reform, but there's a lot more on my plan. Let's talk about the wealth gap. You know that wealth in this country, we typically get it from passing home ownership down to our children. And Black Americans have been disadvantaged for far too long. We've got to make it easier for minority communities to be able to be homeowners. And that means to make it easier for them to obtain loans. The PPP, the Black businesses, we've got to invest in minority businesses. There were 45,000 loans, Pastor Robinson, that went out to Kentucky businesses for the PPP that just went through about 4 months ago or 5 months ago. How many of them went to Black-owned businesses? About 95. That's staggeringly bad. And if you pull the string on that, sir, it's because the way it was structured to go through certain banks, the banks that only had relationships with certain businesses. We got to tackle that, okay? We got to have people that are going to be a voice and say, whoa, how do we make sure that our businesses, all of our businesses, get the loans that we need, all right, that they need? Healthcare, we need to invest in community health centers, all right, because we know we got to expand the Affordable Care Act, shore it up, do things like the public option, subsidized throughout a pandemic. We've got to clean up the hazardous sites in urban areas, but also in rural areas in Kentucky, okay? That's really important. As I mentioned before, we got to close the education gap. Grants for school infrastructure, but it's all out there and it's all a starting place. And what I want to say before I finish the final remarks about this racial equality plan, folks, it's just the start. I don't have all the answers. I'll tell you what, I'm going to run for Senate and then I'm going to do a town hall with y'all. And you tell me what I need to know, because we need to do better. And I'm committed to that. And you should know that. It's just the start. And I'd love for your feedback. But here's the bottom line on the end. And I know I've got 2 seconds here, so I'm going to wrap it up real quick. We need change in this country. Okay. We've got to tackle things like voting rights and helping working people, helping poor people, tackling systemic racism. I want to partner with my fellow Kentuckians to make your lives better. All right. I don't have all the answers. Nobody has done more to hurt poor Kentuckians and working Kentuckians than Mitch McConnell. All right. I want to get rid of him to do something for you, to make your life better. And I don't want to be there for 42 years, which is why I'm for term limits. Because when I do good work, and I want to, and I fully intend to do that, then I'm going to turn it over to you, Reverend Stevens, or you, Tiffany, for you to run, because we need your voice up there. All right? That's how we do this. But I need every single one of you. I need your help to kick him out so that we can move forward. All right? Thank you, everyone. And frankly, it's an honor to be here. And it would be an honor to work for my fellow Kentuckians of all stripes, of all different backgrounds, and particularly poor and working Kentuckians. And I look forward to that.
Thank you, Ms. McGrath, again for joining us tonight. And thank you especially to all of our participants, Pastor Michael Robinson, who is also known as Tana's pastor, as we know, and Pastor Total Grace Ministries in Lexington, and to Pam McMichael and Tana Fogel, to Tiffany Payette. Thank you so much. Hopefully you'll be able to see everyone here in a minute on the screen as we close out. I wanted to give a report on very briefly that we had a powerful action in front of the Supreme Court today that started at the Supreme Court and then went to the offices for which Ms. McGrath is running to occupy at the Senate. And we had the event lifted up the Kentucky campaign and our family members who are there fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor, and also in the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but not as a memorial, but as a fight that we actually remember them by organizing like never before, and refusing to give in to powerlessness that people want us to feel we have. So the march there was Remember Breonna and Ruth, Rise Up and Vote. And we talked about the Senate's sins that are currently there that have infected that chamber. And we will be back next Monday with more caravans. The Kentucky Poor People's Campaign, as we go to gallery view, has inspired at least 10 other states at this point to come back on Monday, October 5th, to do caravans to each of the Senate offices across the country. And now I'm going to pass it back to, that'll be October 5th at 3:30. You'll see more information coming forward to you. The place to go for all this information is at our top right, poorpeoplescampaign.org/voting. Now, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, our fearless leader, will close us out. And thank you so much. And thank you, Reverend Barbara, who's no longer here on the call, for being a part of this. And Danielle Holmes, our organizer for Kentucky as well.
So thank you, Reverend Rob, and thank you, Ms. McGrath. Thank you to all of the Kentucky Poor People's Campaign, a national call from all revival leaders that are here with us in the program this evening, as well as tuning in from all across Kentucky and all across this country. If folks are interested in the action that we put forward today, there is a groundswell petition, and folks can find that petition if you go to the Poor People's Campaign website. But what I also want to remind people, especially the thousands of folks that are tuning in to hear about the issues and demands of poor and low-income Kentuckians, is that if you're not already involved, please join our MORE campaign. MORE stands for mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people for a movement that votes. You can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org/voting, which is at the top of the screen, as Rob said, to sign up to help protect the vote and unleash the power of poor and low-income voters. We are calling and texting poor and low-income voters 4 days a week. We're training people to become poll monitors in 10 key states, including Kentucky. We're working on that with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and with Forward Justice. We also have a whole month of activities planned for October. And so if you're a part of a faith or a community organization, you can make the prophetic pledge to continue mobilizing voters, participating in the text and phone banking, and then also participating in this weekend's More Faithful Weekend. And again, you can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org/voting to sign up to learn more about all of these. Now, this is a part of a series of activities that we're doing in this country to shift the narrative, to get our people, to get our politicians, to get our candidates talking about the needs and the demands of 140 million and growing poor and low-income people, and to build the power of people from the ground up. We have a saying in this campaign that when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. And we know that that isn't just a nice slogan, that is economic and moral truth. We have been crying out for a long time that somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silenced anymore. This town hall is a powerful moment for us to be able to raise our voices, to break our silence, and to hear from candidates about how they stand on the issues that impact us the most, that are really our issues about life and death. So I want to thank everybody again. I want to thank Amy McGrath for joining us. I want to make a note that we tried and we tried and we tried to get Mitch McConnell on here with us, and he refused. So please Continue to tune in to Poor People's Campaign events. Please join us on Monday for the Moral Monday, where we have these caravans. And please, with us, do more. Mobilize and register. Organize and educate people for a movement that votes. Thank you for joining us this evening. All power to all people, and thank you for being with us. Forward together, not one step back.